My name is Carson Arthur, and on this episode of Green Force, my team and I are about to put a garden on an island. But it's going to be a little bit more complicated than that, because within the design for this garden, I need to include a space for the inhabitants to store their vehicles. But I promise, this is going to be a lot more environmentally friendly than just a parking lot, because the people that live on this island all ride bicycles.
Ward's Island is a very vibrant community. There's about 750 people that live here, and most of them do the commute to the city every day through the main ferry docks here. Right now, it's not a very pleasing entrance to the eye when you come off.
It was embarrassing to both the city and to the people who lived here. It was a neglected space that was not taken care of.
For us at the city, sometimes the budgets are tight, so if we can combine some of our resources and also engage the community to develop a project, that would be a win-win situation.
This is really an awkward space, isn't it?
Sure is, yeah.
So you've got one path, two paths. This is the ferry dock itself. So this is where most of the traffic comes in.
Yes, absolutely. It's a hub of the community right here.
One of the biggest design challenges in this space is the fact that both of the paths go in each direction on each side of the triangle. And what I need to do is make people look into the center of the space. Now I'm seeing that there's already a lot of elements here.
Yes, yeah, lots going on.
What do I have to keep? Let's start with those 3 posts.
They have to stay.
Okay. Bike racks?
The bike rack, we can pretty much scrap that and start all over. And really, we have to address bike storage because there's no vehicles allowed on the island.
Right.
And so everybody's dependent on bikes and carts. So we have to have some sort of system of storage.
I noticed also there's a water fountain.
Yeah, that fountain is pretty much standard for any park fountain across the city.
All right, so then here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna work with the elements that I can't change, mainly those 3 posts, the electrical. I can relocate the water fountain and we'll hide the electrical boxes.
Sounds good.
I think I also do want to incorporate some sort of shelter. I need a focal point in the center space, something that as you come off the ferry, it really welcomes you to the culture of the island.
Very good.
Yeah, it's gonna be a challenge, because as I said before, this is a really awkward space. You're pretty comfortable with designs, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I want to keep the existing roads as they are.
We have to, because we need to access to and from the boats, and we have to plow it in the winter, and it's just the main thoroughfare for the islands.
What I do want to do though is increase the amount of usable space. So I'm going to put interlock across the front half of the triangle so that really you have access straight across, which you never had before.
No, that'll really help with the traffic movement as well, so that's great.
My biggest challenge with this particular design is when you get off the ferry, there's no focal point. I want to put a big gazebo in dead center.
Be a very functional waiting station.
Every time I walk my dog in this park, I notice that gazebo. I know technically it's a grandstand, but the idea is still the same. It's a focal point in the space. I'm going to be using this same technique in my garden at Ward's Island. I'm going to put a Victorian-inspired gazebo in the center of the space, and then I'm going to surround the backside with trees and plants. This is a really good system to use, especially if you have neighbors behind you in your own backyard, because what ends up happening is your eye stops at the gazebo, which is the focal point, and then all the trees and the plants act as a backdrop, so you never really look past them. There will be a color theme for the plants. I'm gonna work with a lot of purple plants like this heuchera, okay? And everything won't be the same. Like I'll bring in other accent plants like this one. You can see how that
contrast, very rich.
Now these plants will also be carried through the space.
With the gazebo there and a nice contrast with the rich colors and textures.
In addition to the white gazebo, I'd like to add another couple of structures, okay? These 2 rectangles right here are actually bike racks. Now these are covers. They look like this. Okay, so they're going to stand about 10 feet tall with an overhang that comes down, so we have at least 7-foot clearance from the interlock. So as long as you're good with it, we can pretty much begin construction.
Let's get over there and get at the work. He's turned it into a very functional space, you know, with the storage of the bikes and the little waiting shelter, and also having like a focal point when you come off the boat.
Is this the center line?
This is the center line here.
Wow. Looks a lot different on paper, doesn't it?
A little smaller than you thought?
Yeah, and that's our gazebo?
That's the gazebo, 10-foot square.
Wow, it makes it really feel weighted on the back end and that there's not much space here at all. Although, you know what? Now that it's sitting here, I'm kind of realizing that that takes up a lot of space.
I can measure it. So you've got 12 feet to the end of the two bikes.
Cow. Right now, we've got bike rack right there.
Right.
We need 6 feet on each side, but in the center section, we're gonna need 12-foot overlap, at least.
At least.
And they're going right here.
One on each side of the design.
Holy cow.
It's gonna be tight with the wheel there.
All right, designing on the fly. You know what we can do is we've got the water fountain there.
Okay.
Gazebo still basically in the center.
Okay.
We'll move the ship wheel to that, so then we're still working in 3, so we'll have element, element, element.
Sure.
And then just the 2 bike racks here.
Okay.
Perfect.
Let's do it.
Crisis avoided, apparently. Because I'm planning to introduce a lot of white structural elements to the garden at Ward's Island, things like the gazebo and the covers for the bicycle racks, I want to offset this using trees, plants, and shrubs that have dark leaves. Now for my trees, I'm going with this Crimson King maple. Now this is often confused with a red maple, but it's in fact part of the Norway maple family. Now it's not a native plant, but it does very well in our climate. In fact, sometimes it can do a little too well. For my second dark leaf plant selection, I'm going with something that's neither shrub nor tree. It's a combination of both, and I know that sounds a little bit weird, but this is the Diablo 9 bark. Now the tree form gives me a double bonus. I still have all the great leaf color, but now I get a bit more height. And the Diablo is known for its papery bark, which in the wintertime looks absolutely amazing. Now, I've got one more plant I want to show you to round out my dark leaf collection. There's a very important reason why I've picked this plant over any other purple leaf plants. The heuchera stays at a consistent height of about 1 foot. And from a design perspective, that's very important, especially if you consider the other plants I've already selected for this garden. For the Crimson King maple, it gets to be between 45 and 65 feet tall. The Diablo 9 bark gets between 10 and 15 feet tall, and the heuchera will hug the ground. Now visually, what I've done is I've created 3 bands of this great purple color. And if I put a white gazebo in the center of them, I've created a very striking effect. Because if it's gonna rain, I don't want this wasting water.
No problem.
How do you feel about this height?
That's a big structure.
The Green Forest team is helping out the Toronto Parks Department with the entranceway to Ward's Island. We've removed all the old bike racks, ripped up the weedy grass, and now it's time for me to find the perfect gazebo to act as a focal point for this space.
No, this is the one I want. I want to go with the square gazebo. In this case, I think the square is going to work a little bit better because the space I'm doing is basically a big triangle. But I'd like to change this one.
We can do that?
I want to lose all the windows in the door. But I think we need railings. In fact, I like the railings on this one,
Okay.
but I want to make it even more ornate.
So as far as the rail choice, you have the straight rail.
Yes.
Or we have what we call our Victorian or turned rail.
Let's go for the colonial rail. In this case, I think what I want to do is I want to keep the opening at one end. So sort of a center opening, railing on each side to the first post, and then rails all the way around. Because what I'm planning in the garden is actually to have plant beds on 3 sides.
Okay.
So you'd really only access it from one side. All right, you know what? Okay, so let's go with those changes, and you deliver.
And we deliver.
Did I mention to you that this is on an island?
No.
With the stonework and the gazebo well on their way, it's time to install the automated watering system.
Then this is the connector system that's all underneath here.
Yes, that's what we used it, yes.
And then these are the actual sprinkler heads.
Yes,
Okay, so right now we've got systems here and coming back across this way
yes.
and all over here.
Yes.
Perfect. My other concern though was I want to have hanging baskets on the gazebo.
Yeah,
In
no
fact,
problem.
on all 4 posts.
No problem.
And the hanging baskets tend to dry out faster than the ground does. So those were really important that they have water lines individually to them.
We call the system, we can use the dripping system for that.
The
Yeah.
other thing that was really important to me for this particular system is I wanted a sensor. Because if it's gonna rain, I don't want this wasting water.
No problem. Rain falls, the system will not work.
Perfect, I like this system
You
already.
need to push the button, that's it.
Nice, I like pushing buttons. How heavy is this thing?
This is pretty heavy.
Oh, we're gonna try and lift this up on top of that?
Exactly. We tried to save some time by building it in the shop
Okay.
and bringing it pre-assembled in 2 pieces to here.
Okay.
And we're gonna lift it with this skid lifter
Okay.
up there, tilt it, put it into place, into those grooves, fit the beam and the rafters in there.
The other thing though, we're still gonna have the braces, right? Coming out at 45-degree angles?
Yeah, we're gonna have those braces in, obviously, to hold the whole thing together, and then you're gonna have your structural decorative braces.
Well, at least it's gonna look good. That's all that really matters.
With the work well underway, I thought it would be a good time for Warren to drop by and check out our progress.
Basically what's gonna happen when they get this leveled is you'd be able to come right across here.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the interlock will be flush on both sides.
And it'll be a nice hard surface for any strollers or tram kind of thing. It's great, yeah.
Absolutely. How do you feel about this height?
That's a big structure.
Well, and that's one of two, right? Because that
Right.
goes on each of these posts.
Yeah.
And then the bike racks that I've had designed are going in this space.
They're going from end to end. Some of the structures were bigger than I thought they were going to be, but when everything's tied together and when it's used and there's going to be bikes in there and there's going to be full of plant material, I think everything will be tied together nicely.
I'm also going to link these structures to the gazebo with some decorative things, although that's called a pavilion.
Well, I think it's going to be the perfect focal point for when you get off the boat. It's right dead center.
That was the idea. I mean, when you get off the ferry, I want people to see this first.
Right, and everything will draw to that.
Exactly. Now, your guys are working on the water fountain, so thank you for that.
That's right.
And you have one that's wheelchair accessible?
Absolutely, it's fully accessible.
That's what I was hoping you'd say. Now, the whole area has been set up for irrigation. Really, any part from here, from the edge of the pavilion, all the way into here,
Okay, and the cross, yeah.
all plants, full.
Great.
So really, I mean, as long as you're happy with where we're at, we're basically on schedule. We should have this done as I said I would.
Great, let's carry on.
Okay, good. How many bikes are you actually going to be able to store on each side of this?
4 per wheel per side would be a real squeeze.
I don't think that's enough. I was hoping to get at least 15.
The Green Force team and I are creating a Victorian-inspired garden at the entranceway to Ward's Island. The old garden has been removed and replaced with an interlock patio with connecting stone pathways, 2 very unique bicycle structures, an in-garden automated watering system, and a low-maintenance gazebo, which is the garden's focal point. Now it's time to go and talk to John about our custom bike racks.
We want the bike rack to look like a bicycle.
Well, let's draw it out, right? I'm gonna have these up and down this way.
Yes, but how many bikes are you actually going to be able to store on each side of this?
4 per wheel per side would be a real squeeze.
I don't think that's enough. I was hoping to get at least 15. So we need to come up with another solution that's going to get me more bike storage.
Let's put it in motion. If we put the coil off the back, like a big spiral, like a dust cloud, like a Wile E. Coyote,
So the
catch
bike,
me if you can.
The bike is moving. The bike is moving along, is what you're saying.
Why not?
So then, how many bikes do you think we could get on the coil?
If we can get 3 or 4 4 coils, we get 2 per side, potentially another 8 bikes.
You know what? This is going to be very cool, and I love the fact that it's functional and yet it's inventive.
If there's one thing that you've been consistent with, Carson, it's unique, it's cool, and it's funky.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a compliment. Thank you, sir.
Let's play with steel.
Yeah, I can't wait to see this finished. I tend not to use a lot of annuals in gardens unless they're in hanging baskets. There's nothing that I like better than a really full and brightly colored hanging basket, which is why I'm going to put 4 in the garden at Ward's Island on each corner of the gazebo. Now, when I choose hanging baskets, I tend to go with ones that are lined with a natural material, like a sphagnum moss or a cocoa mat, versus the plastic-lined alternatives. From an environmental standpoint, I know that these are purely aesthetic, which is why I never want to choose one that one day may end up in a landfill site. I've run into a little bit of a problem with my garden here at Ward's Island. Now, I've selected these huge annual hanging baskets, which I want to use on the 4 corners of the pavilion. But because these baskets are so large, I can't find brackets which will hold them up. So I'm just going to make my own. Now, if you want to try this, you need the following materials. You need 2x4 lumber. You need a sheet of dimensional wood, which is at least 16 inches wide. You need eye bolts, because this is what the basket is going to hang on, and you need a jigsaw. And I'm going to use the jigsaw because I want these hanging brackets to look just like the rest of the garden, which is very Victorian. Now you can see what I've done here. I've taken my 2x4s and I've created an L bracket. Structurally, this will hold most of the weight of the planter, but I still want it stronger. So for that, I've taken my triangle piece of wood and I've hand drawn a decorative detail and I've cut it out with the jigsaw. This piece goes kind of like that. And structurally, this increases the strength of the plant holder exponentially. Now all I have to do is drill a hole in the top and hang my eye bolt so I have somewhere to hang my planter, and then do 3 more. There, not only was this project easy, but it looks good, and no matter how heavy this plant gets, this bracket's gonna hold it up. Well, this garden is definitely coming together, and now you can see some of the design elements as I've envisioned them for the space. Starting with the bike shelters and the bike racks themselves. By painting them white and putting that gingerbreading detail on, we've linked these 2 structures to the pavilion. Working together, these 3 structures create the focal point in the space. They're the first things you see when you get off the ferry, and they draw you in. That's when you start to notice the little details. Things like the gingerbreading and the turned spindles on the pavilion and the beautiful hanging baskets. This creates that Victorian theme that I was really trying to inspire in the space. Now, there are a few other things I want to show you. This is that amazing water fountain that Warren was able to get for us. Not only is it wheelchair accessible, but because we've brought the interlock right under the front face of it, everybody can use it. Now, to finish this garden, we do have a few things to do. We have some painting, we've got a little bit more planting, a whole lot of mulch to lay, and I have a few things I need to finish up as well. But I promise, once everything's done, that this is going to be one of the best gardens we've ever installed. Well, we definitely have a focal point now.
Sure do. I think it's a great legacy for the island.
It's a vast improvement. We love it. I love it.
Green Forest has taken a neglected park space at the entranceway to Ward's Island and created a fantastic garden for both the inhabitants and the visitors to this island oasis. We've removed the tired garden and gave it a complete facelift. We've added a Victorian-inspired gazebo and complementing bike racks. We've installed a wheelchair-accessible water fountain, automated watering system, and tons of plants and trees. With just a few final touches left, then this space will be ready for Warren and the people of Ward's Island.
This is one of the few perennial grasses I have in my own very crowded backyard. This is called Japanese bloodgrass, and the reason I love it is because from the moment the snow melts in the spring until the minute it falls again in the autumn, this has bright red leaves. Now, the one thing I have noticed about this, though, is that it takes a little while to get established. So if you're patient, it's well worth the effort. One of the toughest plants in any landscape is this little guy right here. Now, the Latin name for this is Rosa rugosa, but it's more commonly known as the wild rose or even the sea spray rose. Basically, this can tolerate road salt, it's perfect beside pools because it can handle chlorine, and it does all of that while still blooming. Not only does this wheel give this space a whole lot of personality, it also finishes off the garden. It's time to get Warren. Well, we definitely have a focal point now.
Sure do.
Lots for you to see when you get off the ferry.
Yeah, this is great, and everything leads into the pavilion. Well, I was pleasantly surprised with how all the different elements were dealt with. I think everything's been addressed.
Perfect, that's what we were trying to do. So let me point out a few of the features for you. The bike shelters themselves, we did paint them white.
I liked the work you did, the wrought iron work. It sort of complements the pavilion.
Thank you. And the bike racks themselves.
Yeah. That's going to be a real conversation piece. Like, that's great.
Not only was Warren impressed with the garden, I think he was kind of relieved. This is probably the first time he's actually given up control over one of his parks. Now, we brought the interlock in through all the space, okay, and we made it flush on each side, so it is completely wheelchair accessible, and it ramps up into the pavilion itself.
It looks great. It fits right in here.
Now, the pavilion, I went with a model that is low maintenance. The hanging baskets, they all have irrigation drip lines. In fact, that's
see the line,
yeah. Yep. And a couple other things. I mean, you can see all the plants around here, which really frame the space. I love the ship's wheel.
That's really nice. It's from an old ship off the Great Lakes here called the SS Cayuga, and there's a picture of it in action.
Very cool. Can I keep this?
Sure can.
And good call on the water fountain as well.
Oh, yeah, you remember the old one. It was just an old brick sort of pyramidal fountain that's typical to our park system. And
it was in the dirt.
In the dirt, and not that friendly.
A few things I want to point out as well. Okay. Now, we did talk about the irrigation system, but the whole garden has been laid out properly. So really, everything's got coverage, okay? But all of the plant material, by and large, is low maintenance.
I look forward to seeing everything fill out here, and just the different textures and colors you've used look really good. Any sort of public project like this is a good rallying point, and I think it really ties into a lot of green initiatives, from the gazebo using recycling materials and the watering system, which has a sensor, so it's very efficient. I think it's a great legacy for the island.
And of course, we have the 700 inhabitants of the island. Is this going to work for them?
I think everybody's going to be pleased. Given what was here about a week ago to what's here now, amazing.
Big change. Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
This was a great opportunity.
Come back anytime.
You know what? I am going to visit. I can't wait to see this.
Hop on a boat and come on over.
I came this morning, I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, this is like the Wizard of Oz. If you watch that film, it starts in black and white and then it turns to color.
I think it's, to take urban spaces and make them nicer is a real plus for the whole community, not just the island, but for the whole city.
I think it's cheerful. I love all the planting. It's a vast improvement. We love it. I love it.
For me, the most exciting part of this makeover is the fact that everybody who lives on this island rides a bicycle. So if you're a visitor here, you're reminded of a time when we used to ride bicycles more often than we drove cars. With the help of the Green Forest team, we've taken this piece of land and we've taken it back to Victorian times, when things like gingerbreading and curlicues were all the rage. And with a few modern conveniences, we made that theme work for today. My name is Carson Arthur. Thanks for watching.
Certainly for all of us who pass by here every day, it's going to be lovely to have something that looks nice.
When people come off the ferry, they're greeted by a beautiful and artful presentation of the island.
It's lighthearted, and they've tried to make something out of, a silk purse out of a sow's ear.